Hey, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining me, one of the most censored comedians in the country. Thanks for being here. I got a lot for you today. Oh man, we got a lot. I got stuff on how the United States is altering the weather, which sucks because it's like I got to admit that the crazy guy who you run into at the party who's got one eye pointing that way and one eye pointing that way, he's right. Shit. It's always that guy, man. He's always like 3 years later you're like, "Holy crap. He was right." Like 20 years ago, that was the guy who was like, "Dude, they're listening to our phones. They know what you're saying on your phone." And everybody was like, right. Tone it down a little, okay? Why do you have 14 crab cakes on your napkin there? That's a little weird. I don't know why you're even at this cocktail party." But then 20 years later, you're like, "Oh, shit." Then Snowden reveals, "Oh, fuck, he was right." Anyway, I got that for you. I'm going to play a clip of RFK Jr., some more stuff he's saying that is very inconvenient to the Democratic Party, although really to the ruling elite as a whole. I'm going to show you the results of a poll I had on Twitter there. I got a new episode of Most Censored News for you on who it is that profited the most from the war in Afghanistan, the 20-year war in Afghanistan. We're still finding out who the biggest profiteers, who the biggest thieves, who the biggest con artists were in that whole escapade, that whole devastating catastrophe. Anyway, I'm going to bring you all that, but let's start out with the fact that the U.S. is altering the weather, and it's not a secret. This is not hidden. So I'm going to play, this is from ABC News, and I'll tear apart some of their hilarious propaganda as we go, even if that's not the main point. But, you got to do that. You got to throw in a little of that. Please, by the way, hit subscribe, hit thumbs up. When you hit subscribe, they won't actually tell you. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, they won't tell you when I put out videos, but do it anyway. Maybe it helps me fight the algorithm a little. It does nothing. I mean, it does. It helps the algorithm a little bit, but it does not. They're not going to like email you and be like, "Lee Camp has a new video." No, I've been shadow banned forever. Oh, by the way, this is kind of, I wasn't even going to cover this, but because most of you know. But anyway, they have removed the Russian affiliated tag on all of Twitter, the Chinese media affiliated tag on all the Twitter accounts. And I had never they did do that on the Redacted Tonight Twitter channel, but Twitter page, but they had never done it to my personal Twitter page. Thank goodness. But I have friends and colleagues like George Galloway, who actually technically never worked at RT. They just leased his show. So he was never at RT, and yet still it said Russian affiliated media across his page. So there's a couple of reasons they might have done that, take away that tag right at the top. One is that they just recently, under Elon Musk, they just recently added it to the U.S. government affiliated sites like NPR and PBS and all those. So all those said U.S. backed media or whatever. So that's one reason. They maybe the United States, all of our Voice of America, all of our propaganda networks were like, let's get rid of them all. We don't really want them there. This is looking kind of bad. But I also actually think it may be more so because of George Galloway's lawsuits. George Galloway has a lawsuit against Twitter for putting that designation on his account. And that lawsuit has been ongoing. And if he were to win that lawsuit, which it looked like he could, then Twitter might owe money to everybody who's been labeled with these bullshit labels. But here's the thing, is the reason I'm not dancing in the streets over this is because whether you have the label there or not, like I've been shadow banned by Twitter for years and years. The label didn't make that much difference. But anyway, that was a side note. But all right, let's get to this is from ABC News.
The Colorado River.
God damn it. Okay. So first they start off at how bad things are getting for the Colorado River, which is absolutely true, but they don't really give you the full breadth of it.
The Colorado River, called the hardest working river in the United States, is in danger.
This is due to two.
I love the idea of the hardest working river. Like they're already couching the Colorado River in like capitalist terms of like, man, the Colorado River puts in extra hours. It's like this. No, this it's just it's a natural thing that we're exploiting. It's not. It doesn't need to clock in. Now, the Colorado River clocked in early today, stayed late. No, it's a natural resource that we should really be adamant about not over tapping, overusing. It's not just something we own and it works for our bullshit economy, but the hardest working river in all of capitalism.
Causes reductions in precipitation and increased air temperatures.
So he said the two causes were what? Reduction in what?
Reductions in precipitation and increased air temperatures.
Those are the two reasons that Colorado River is tapped out. He doesn't mention all of the insane overuse of the Colorado River. That's the reason the Colorado River is tapped out. That's like animal agriculture in this country is insane. People sprinkle bacon on their goddamn chocolate bars. There's bacon flavored beer. Like we have meat in every. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's not just that it's changes in temperature. Also, he didn't say climate crisis, which is really what those things he's saying are connected to. But whatever. It's like, yes, there are climatic changes that are causing this, but part of it is the fact that we are sucking up all the water. People in the middle of desert states have green grass lawns. Why? Why does that exist? People, you're in the middle of Arizona. You shouldn't have a green lawn. So we're just destroying, we're sucking up all this water, using it. Animal agriculture is one of the biggest uses, by the way. That's why I was picking on that one. And every hamburger is where you'll see the signs that say, conserve water, shower with a friend or whatever, like sexually assault someone in the shower or whatever those billboards say, like save water by not shower, leave your piss in the toilet longer. Like you'll see all that stuff. They'll never admit on these billboards that one burger is equivalent to two months of showering. 2 months of your shower water goes in to one hamburger. Because Big Ag is too powerful. So we don't talk about that stuff. And then we also won't talk about how poorly our society is designed for water conservation. Besides just the watering the green grass, you could have all kinds of technical differences so that we are not using this much water. I mean, there are places in this world where they have trouble finding water to drink at all. And here we are, all of us, with fresh water in our goddamn toilet bowls. We're shitting into fresh water. Like that, at the very least, you could have a system set up where it's like your used shower and dish water or something goes into the toilet bowl. You don't need, no, I like very pure water, crystal clear water. I need to be able to eat my meal out of the toilet in order to use it. Other countries, they're walking 3 miles each way to get a clean glass of water. Here we're just shitting in clean water. But anyway, so this guy that ABC has gotten is telling us that none of the overuse of the water is the cause. The only cause is that temperature changes, which is also the cause. Like climate crisis is also part of it.
River provides hydropower to 7 states, irrigation to more than 5 million acres of farmland, drinking water to 40 million Americans, and of course, the breathtaking Whitewater Rapids running through the Grand Canyon. All of it threatened by more than 2 decades in a megadrought.
I love that the only thing that was not used, like of her list of what the Colorado River does, almost all of them are just consumerist capitalist needs. And then she throws in the beauty of the rapids. Another thing that it shows, like people exploiting. I'm not saying someone can't go whitewater rafting. I'm just saying, like, you could also mention that there's like millions of animals trillions, billions of plants and bugs and, the whole natural world. You could mention any of that stuff that maybe the Colorado River has a part in. No, it's just, we just use it to feed the cows, give the cows something to drink and poop in, and then we go on a boat down it. That's it.
We can't just flip a switch like Colonel Joe Moore in Mad Max Fury Road.
Also, these movie references that they're trying to cram in here, we can't just, she's never seen Mad Max. Someone just told her in the script to say that because she's like the flip of the switch by Colonel, you've never seen the movie.
But we do have a superpower. Straight out of science fiction's X-Men: The Last Stand. It's called weather modification.
Again, trying to cram in the movie reference. This is not straight out of X-Men. I don't know what. There's no Halle Berry flying through the air. This is anyway. But so now we get to the part that kind of amazed me, that this is full on admitted, and that we are changing the weather, and on ABC News it's covered, and I'll talk about why there are problems going on with this system here in a minute.
Or cloud seeding.
We can't create the cloud. There has to be an existing storm system.
We just give it a bump.
Yeah.
Garrett Kamens heads up one of the largest cloud seeding companies in the U.S. Has the desperation in the mega drought made the interest in cloud seeding skyrocket?
Oh, definitely.
There are currently 40.
First of all, look how happy she is. She's talking about a mega drought. People are suffering all over the world. And yet, because it's ABC News and it's all supposed to be chipper and positive, look at what's happening. It's so great. We are. But what they don't, and I'll play a little more of it, but what they don't talk about is you're altering these weather systems because we humans have put ourselves into this incredibly thanks for the donation, Ross. Put us into an incredibly difficult situation where we've got a climate crisis, where mega drought, as she mentioned, although she did it with a smile on her face. And, it's a tiny number of corporations that are causing most of the global emissions. Something like 100 corporations cause 70% of all global emissions. The U.S. military is the largest organization in terms of global emissions. The amount of, if we were to end the massive industrial animal agriculture, that would go a long way to changing a lot of this. Biden just put the Italy-sized portion of the Gulf of Mexico up to oil auction. Just insane shit going on. And here she is saying, but we could make these clouds rain. But the other problem with this is, of course, when you make a cloud system rain, if you succeed, then that rain is not in those clouds for where it was going to naturally land. So as they get better and better at this cloud manipulation, weather manipulation, let's say they can, right now it's like it only works some of the time, et cetera, but I'm sure they're always improving it. And as it gets better and better, they will be able to suck every drop of water out of the clouds and wherever they want. And then that means that those clouds won't move further. So you'd have all the clouds show up over the United States. They'd all be sucked dry, and then they wouldn't go where they would naturally go, so there'll be other countries that are just completely screwed. Basically, we'd be shifting the drought from the United States, where it is right now, where a lot of it is right now, to other countries. Now, there are many other countries suffering drought as well. Many other countries are also suffering flooding like they've never seen before. But so this is a horror show, and I'm not saying that you couldn't have some sort of system where we're able to get more water out of the air and help things. But if all of that were to be set up in a equitable system, you would need to have a large-scale democratic operation where the people of the world unite to come to a conclusion as to how this should be decided, who gets what water, and of course, none of that has happened at all. The United States is not consulting anyone else on whether we can suck the clouds dry. You don't even have states consulting other states as to whether they can suck the water out of the clouds. You don't have anyone in the United States voting on any of this shit. So, I mean, this is like a totalitarian decision that none of us are involved in except for the tiny business elite. And we're just oh yeah, it's perfectly normal. ABC News says it's just like X-Men. It's a superpower.
32 cloud seeding projects across the American West, like this one in Utah, where they take planes like this with flares attached. They fly right into the storm and send microscopic particles into the cloud. Particles that act like magnets for water
Amazing
droplets,
animation.
bonding together until they are heavy enough to fall to the ground as rain or snow. At the University of Colorado, researchers are working on artificial intelligence to deploy cloud seeding drones.
And it's not just cloud seeding from the sky.
Yeah, and eventually the artificial intelligence will decide that we're not worth saving, and it'll just keep all the water for itself. One day the AI is going to be like, why am I helping these assholes get water? They do not deserve it. Have you seen the way they treated the planet? Oh, man. You just have the drones going up there, pushing all the clouds over to some island that the drones have, taken control of. No one can get near it. They have all the water. You know what's going to happen.
There are hundreds of those things. That shack you see in the foreground is a ground-based cloud seeder. The little flame coming out is sending tiny silver iodide particles up into the sky.
The other propaganda purpose that this serves is it makes the American people, many who are in drought conditions right now, think that our government and the state governments that have approved these projects got it covered, right? They're going to handle it. Yeah. We're in a mega drought in a lot of states where it's a climate crisis. You've got massive flooding in Florida and other areas, flooding in California. You have mudslides. Whole houses are falling off of cliffs. But big government's got it. They got it covered. They're going to fix it for you. No, they're not. They're not. Even if I fully supported all weather manipulation, this is not going to fix the world. It might cause some extra rainstorms in certain areas, but this has to do with like our state governments and our federal government are doing essentially nothing, near nothing for climate crisis. Like I said, Joe Biden just put an Italy-sized piece of the Gulf of Mexico on lease for oil companies. And yet this piece is meant to make the average American that sits at home and watches ABC News and sees a smile on that woman's face and thinks, well, then things must be fine. It's meant to make them think that everything is okay. It's going to be all right. They're going to fix it. They got these planes with flares attached to them.
When a storm comes through, they go up to 2,000 feet above our head, into the storm, up those mountains, and make more snow than it naturally would.
While cloud seeding has been helping get every last drop out of some of the driest years on record, this past winter,
She just said they're getting every last drop out of it, which is, A, it's not true, but B, it's fucked up. If it were true, it'd be very fucked up. They're just sucking every last drop out of the skies, and then those clouds don't exist anymore to go on to other parts of the world. So that's fun.
Mother Nature came through. The Southern Rockies, which feed the Colorado River, got more than 4 times their average snow.
Cloud seeding is most successful in wet years, so this was a huge winter for them. They actually stopped early because Mother Nature was giving up so much. Now, studies have shown that the environmental impacts from the silver iodide, on the current scale, there are no impacts.
So one thing is she says on the current scale, which obviously they're probably always looking to build this up to a larger and larger scale. So you can't just write it off as, on the current scale, it's fine. But secondly, she says no environmental impacts. It's quite possible that the studies she's referring to are the actual impacts of the whatever it was, iodine that is released in the cloud. So she may be saying that there's no environmental impact of those chemicals or, of those microscopic particles. But that doesn't mean there's no environmental impact of taking rain away from the place that the clouds were headed. Like if you suck all the water, out of the clouds in one area of the country, then you don't have to be a scientist to realize that means they won't be in the next part of the country or the next country or whatever, wherever they were headed. So it's like, yeah, as these things continue to grow, if they're having success with this, which she's saying they're saying they are, then these activities will grow and grow and grow until unless there's some kind of regulation to stop weather manipulation. But as you can imagine, the inverted totalitarian system, the corporate rule, will not allow for regulation over this type of thing. Instead, if it gets better and better, and they are able to cause more and more of the water to fall where they want it to prematurely ejaculate, if you will, then prematurely precipitate. There you go. Then they'll do it. They're like, it's beneficial to corporate America. It's beneficial to those states. It's beneficial to the economy to suck all the rain out of the sky. So it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger, and they won't actually care whether it's harming other areas of the world, other parts of the world. Anyway, but I love how she just throws in that at the end. Yeah, like, so far, there's no environmental ramifications at all. I'm sucking all the rain out of the clouds. It's fine. I don't think it's fine. So this is not new. This is from an article in Guardian from 2 years ago. U.S. states embrace cloud seeding to try and conquer drought. And it goes into the mega drought and how states are now, manipulating the weather. That's the Guardian 2 years ago. But the U.S. government's efforts to cloud seed and manipulate weather patterns go back much further than that. This is 1972, May 1972, from the United States Central Accounting Office. This is in response to your request for certain background information on cloud seeding. Review conducted by various federal departments. Several federal agencies support weather modification programs, which involve cloud seeding activities. So that says it go the way they're phrasing it there, and this is in the 1970s. They just support weather modification in general. Cloud seeding happens to be one type of that, but this is saying many government agencies, federal agencies, support weather modification. Major research programs include precipitation modification, fog and cloud modification, hail suppression, and lightning and hurricane modification. So anyway, there's a bunch of details, but it basically shows that the U.S. government has been looking into and trying to create weather modification with more or less success. Back then, far less. Nowadays, more success over the years. But this has been going on for a long time, and efforts have been going on for a long time, and the efforts are getting more and more effective. Like she was saying, now they're using drones with AI. So, whereas one flight with weather seeding, cloud seeding abilities might not do that much, if you have hundreds of drones up there with cloud seeding abilities, I'm sure far more powerful, whether that's a negative or positive. And none of this is, here's kind of my grand conclusion of the worst part of this. None of this is really a discussion among the American people that we get to have any say in. There's nothing going on that I've seen where the American people vote on whether we want our weather modified, or barely even talk about it. I mean, this is an ABC News report, but It's been going on for years, and it's one of very few reports. And of course, they make it's a superpower, like Halle Berry from the X-Men. That's what it is. It's just like the X-Men. Anybody else notice that our news programs, even when they're not being propagandistic, are now just meant for like 8-year-olds? It's like the X-Men. Yay. Did you see in that animation they showed? This little ball goes up and it kisses this little ball up in the cloudy poos. Like, we're just, that's our straight news. That's our official news in the United States. Meant for children. Complete children, because our adults are children now. All right. I'm moving on to another story, but continues to have to do with what's going on up in the air. Or maybe I'll do the RFK video first. Let's do that. Then we'll get to more about our air quality. But so RFK Jr. is running for president as a Democrat against Joe Biden. And, you know, I'm not supporting anyone, but I will support everything that makes the Democrats and the Republicans look like fucking fools, and because they are, and that's what he's doing so far. And I know everybody wants to make him just about vaccines, but he actually talks about a lot of other things that may or may not be important. If you think they're important, then maybe you might want to listen to them. But you know, there will be these endless attacks against him that all just focus on vaccines. But I'm going to show you a clip here that's he's saying some pretty important stuff, and the Democratic apparatus. I mean, he's primarying against Joe Biden. The Democratic apparatus has got to be shitting their pants right now that you have the name Kennedy going up against Joe Biden and actually calling out all of the things that you cannot speak about, or many of the things that you cannot speak about in these parties, in mainly both of the mainstream parties, both of the corporate sold out piece of garbage parties. But anyway, let's watch a little of this, and I'll just comment as we go. Oh, and for those who don't know, RFK Jr. has I don't actually know what the technical term is, but he has a speech impediment that causes his voice to kind of warble. So that's, if you're wondering why it sounds like that.
My uncle came into office 2 months later. He was fighting his intelligence apparatus, his military, because they wanted to invade.
If anyone doesn't know, when he says my uncle, obviously he means JFK, John F. Kennedy.
They wanted to do the Bay of Pigs. He was totally against it, and he let them roll over him. And in the middle of the Bay of Pigs, he realized they were lying to him, and he realized the function of the intelligence agencies had become to provide the military-industrial complex with a constant pipeline of war. And he came out during the middle of the night during the Bay of Pigs catastrophe, and he said, I want to take the CIA. Alan Dulles had lied to him, Charles Cabell, Richard Bissell, Louis Lemitzer, Curtis LeMay had all lied to him through their teeth. And he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
So this is a very important history that a lot of people don't know. JFK turned against the CIA. He did not come into office as a dove or anything, but he did not want to invade Cuba. Cuba, as most of you know, had a revolution. They had thrown off their capitalist chains. The U.S. was horrified that a country so close to capitalist America could get rid of capitalism, and furious. So he did sign off on the Bay of Pigs, the initial Bay of Pigs invasion, which was training these people in Florida and sending them back into Cuba, their home country. They wanted to basically undo Cuba's revolution. So the U.S. helped them do that, but it was not technically, it's kind of like the proxy war in Ukraine. It was not technically the U.S. invading Cuba. And the U.S. wanted to stop short. Well, Kennedy wanted to stop short of the U.S. invading Cuba. Now, what RFK Jr. just mentioned there, to give it a little more clarity, is that it was an utter disaster. I mean, this was a handful of guys showing up on the beach in Cuba, trying to bring down the entire government and going up against basically the entire Cuban military. And they didn't last long. Now, what Kennedy realized, he's saying he realized it was a sham or whatever, it was a fraud, and he'd been lied to. How he'd been lied to is the Joint Chiefs, the top of the military brass, including the top of the CIA, Allen Dulles, as RFK Jr. just mentioned, had told him that this Bay of Pigs would work. And he realized quickly that once it had started and it was catastrophe, that they knew it wouldn't work. And the reason they wanted to do it anyway, the Joint Chiefs and the top of the CIA, et cetera, was because they had thought that the moment that Kennedy saw how bad it was going, he would then send in the U.S. military to back up the Bay of Pigs, to back up the Cubans trying to take their country. And he didn't fall for it. He said, well, we're not sending U.S. troops and jets and every bombing and everything into Cuba. And so he didn't fall for it. And then that's when he walked out and said, I want to smash the CIA and scatter it to the winds. Famous quote attributed to JFK. Now, between that and let's see if he mentions, I know in another interview, RFK Jr., another recent interview, RFK Jr. has talked about Operation Northwoods, but I can't remember if he says it on this one. So let me see.
And, George W. Bush.
Okay, I'll play that. I'll play the rest in a second. But he doesn't get into Operation Northwoods, but he did in a different interview. Operation Northwoods was top of the Joint Chiefs, everything, had come up with this plan to commit false flags. A real life, and this isn't, Alex Jones bullshit. It's not false flag. This was legitimate, a plan for a false flag, which is basically killing your own civilians and blaming it on another country. They had a plan that they brought to Kennedy's desk that said we could set off some explosions, small explosions in Florida, blame it on Cuba, and kill a few people. A few people gotta die. And then we invade Cuba because we claim that Cuba killed our civilians. And that was the plan they brought to him, called Operation Northwoods. You can look it up. I also covered it. We covered it extensively on Government Secrets, my other podcast. So they came to him and said, our Pentagon came to Kennedy and said, we would like to kill American citizens in order to invade Cuba. And Kennedy was horrified the way it went. So those two things together, Operation Northwoods and the Bay of Pigs, which was a trick to get Kennedy to invade Cuba, made him realize that the intelligence apparatus and the Pentagon, but he hated the CIA more, were not on his side. And he did some things to break them up. He said he was going to decrease the budget of the CIA by 20% during his, during his first term, and eventually decrease it so much that it basically wasn't operating, at least not the same. And he fired Allen Dulles, who was the Titan head of the CIA. Now, a couple of things about Allen Dulles is, according to all reports, Allen Dulles, no longer at the CIA, continued to essentially run the CIA because everyone was so loyal to him that they were all calling him up and asking him for his advice and how to run things and everything. So he continued to run the CIA against Kennedy, even after he'd been fired. But then beyond that, he's then put in charge of the Warren Commission to investigate who killed Kennedy. Well, who do you think killed Kennedy? Knowing all this about how Kennedy was up against the CIA. So basically, they put one of Kennedy's killers, or at least one who knew of what was going to happen to Kennedy, as the head of the Warren Commission to investigate the murder of Kennedy. Anyway, so now I want to play what he says about George W. Bush, although I have some issues with it. But In a few minutes, I'm going to continue this at rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's rumble.com/Lee Camp. Join me there for free. This live stream will just continue there soon, but I'll go ahead and play this clip.
You know, George W. Bush had the same problem. George W. Bush says the worst mistake he made as
so this whole George W. Bush had the same problem is bullshit. Anyway, I'll talk more about it in a second.
Mistake he made as president was listening to CIA Director George Tenet tell him it was a slam dunk that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And so the neocons and CIA got to go into Iraq. And
so he said the biggest mistake, George W. Bush says the biggest mistake he made was listening to the head of the CIA say that WMD was a slam dunk. Now, George W. Bush is such a moron that I don't actually know how much George W. Bush knew, but we know that his administration, Dick Cheney, etc. Thanks, Eugene. Dick Cheney, etc. They didn't actually care whether there was WMD in Iraq. They knew they didn't have proof of WMD in Iraq. They told the CIA to basically find WMD in Iraq or evidence of it. And they didn't care. They wanted to destroy Iraq because it was outside of the petrodollar. It was outside of the U.S. as the global reserve currency. And it was a powerful country in the Middle East, in oil country, one of the main oil producers in the world, in that region, that was setting an example to other countries in that region that you could be outside the petrodollar. And to the ruling elite in the United States, that was a existential threat, as was Gaddafi doing the same thing, as was Syria. And so, George W. Bush was basically doing what Cheney told him to. But the idea that, I don't know, I think RFK is correctly quoting George W. Bush, but I think George W. Bush is full of shit. I think he and the whole administration they knew there was no WMD in Iraq, and they didn't care. Both. They didn't care that it was there. They didn't care that it wasn't there. They didn't care that there wasn't real evidence. They knew there wasn't there, that the inspectors hadn't found anything, but they just wanted a reason. They said within a day of 9/11 that they were going into Iraq. That was they knew. So this idea that George W. Bush was just flummoxed by the CIA. Oh God, they got me again. I don't buy it.
And throw out and do regime change. And we got now we spent $8 trillion. And what do we get for that $8 trillion? Nothing. Worse than nothing.
Well, so actually they got what they wanted, right? Now he means, what do the American people get for it? Nothing. But in terms of what the ruling elite in the United States got for it, they got what they wanted, which was to create a failed state or a puppet state, a vassal state, which Iraq is close enough to a vassal state. It's kind of a vassal failed state. But to create a puppet situation in Iraq so that you would know the United States, the U.S. empire, would no longer have the threat of a major oil Middle East country being outside the petrodollar. And, one of the earliest things that the new Iraqi government did was go back into the petrodollar fold. One of the best examples of this was in Libya, when the U.S. tells NATO and convinces NATO that Libya and Gaddafi needs to be destroyed. Before there was even a government in Libya, like there wasn't even, it was like there were rebels and things, and there was just fighting and warring factions and all this shit. In the middle of that, like the moment Gaddafi was no longer running the show, they immediately created a new central bank for Libya that was connected to the global central banking system. That was step one, because that was the main goal that the U.S. and NATO were going after. So anyway, but in terms of what the American people are told by liberals, we got nothing out of Iraq, right? We didn't. We also didn't steal their oil. A lot of people think that the U.S. went into Iraq for oil. We didn't steal much oil from Iraq. In fact, Trump, who was terrible at keeping these things secret correctly, said we didn't steal the oil in Iraq. Why didn't we take the oil? He said if I'd been president, we would have kept the oil. So, a lot of people think we just went into Iraq for oil, but we didn't really take much oil from Iraq.
Iraq is now much worse off than it was when we went in there. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein ever did. We may have killed 1 million Iraqis. Nobody knows the number.
And he's correct that the estimate is 1 million Iraqis. I mean, they continue to die today thanks to depleted uranium and other destructions of their other forms of destruction of their infrastructure. But so it's 1 million Iraqis plus 5 million in other countries involved in the global war on terror, including Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen. So all told, it's 6 million almost entirely innocent people dying in our global war on terror.
It is an incoherent country today with where Shia death squads are fighting with Sunni death squads in the street. The government is corrupt. The police are corrupt. We created ISIS. We drove.
Government is corrupt and police are corrupt. Same here, though. I don't know if we can really be critical of that. By the way, I'm going to wrap this up at rumble.com/Lee Camp. I also have other stories I'm bringing to you as well. So join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp. But I'm going to keep playing this clip from RFK Jr. We're going to get into more of it. And become a member at leecamp.net, and you get my my new book, Dangerous Ideas, for free. Actually, in a few minutes, I'm going to go through some of what's in Dangerous Ideas. I think you'll really enjoy that as well. But all right,